good evening and welcome to the last in this series of Crimewatch. Tonight we're coming to you live from the stunning Llyn Reservoir in North Wales. Just across the water from here, the remains of a murdered man were found. The full details coming up, but first, Tina Dahealy is here with everything else we have for you tonight.
These officers are ready for your calls on our latest wanted faces and CCTV. We also need to know who fatally stabbed teenager Andrew Oteng-Owusu in South London last month. Plus, we'll have the story of how detectives caught a sadistic murderer targeting people at random in the Essex town of Colchester.
2 young people have been brutally murdered within the same town. The first murder was incredibly unusual for Colchester. To have a second murder in less than 3 months was extraordinary. You could feel the sense of fear within the local community.
In November last year, 2 brothers camping in the woods across the reservoir just behind me made a gruesome discovery. They came across human remains. What was left of a body had been there for some time, but it was clear the person had been murdered. Detectives began to build a picture of who this might be, and just last month had a major breakthrough. Each year, the stunning, rugged landscape of North Wales plays host to the motorsport event Wales Rally GB. In November, as the rally entered its final stages, 2 brothers camped out in remote forest nearby.
Been going to rally every year, probably since I was about 5. My father used to take us.
Big rally fans. I'd only been a couple of times when I was younger, so I came up to watch it with him, because I haven't been for years.
So we came in the woods to find somewhere suitable to have a little fire, just have a few beers.
Your turn again. Seems to be always my turn.
Mark went off to find some firewood.
I walked about 10, 15 yards away from my brother, and I found some bones on the floor. And then on closer inspection, realised that they're actually human remains.
We received a call to say that 2 brothers had made the discovery of what they believed to be human remains. We sent local officers to make an assessment, and they concluded that it was part of a human body. We had to set a strategy to ensure that we maximised all available forensic recovery from this location. It was a painstaking examination. The body was fully decomposed, but over a period of 2 weeks, we managed to find and recover almost the full skeletal remains of an adult male. The injuries to the body were suspicious. The male suffered significant head trauma. We believe this person had been killed. But we didn't know who this person was and who may have been responsible for that killing.
Forensic scientists began building a picture of the victim.
The post-mortem procedure gave us a lot of clues. The man was beyond 54 years of age at the time of death, but probably in his 60s. He was between 5'8" and 5'10.5" in height, had suffered some injuries during his life, a fracture to his nose. We also know that he suffered from arthritis, and also would have had a problem with his spine that would have caused him limited mobility, in as much as there was some fusion of the spine.
Detectives also turned to forensic odontologist Dr. John Rosie for help.
The first thing that was apparent were that all the posterior molar teeth were absent. Now, that to me indicated that that person wasn't particularly dentally aware in his younger years. And then all of a sudden, the pennies dropped because his premolar teeth have got some very extensive crown work, root canal work and filling work, which is of a high quality. Now, the style of the dentistry is typical of dentistry that was done in the 90s, 2000, possibly late 80s. This description also appears in dental journals in the hope that it will jog a dentist's memory about work that he has completed.
2 items of badly decomposed clothing were also recovered near the scene. Fragments from a jumper and what appeared to be the label from some underwear.
We did find 2 items that may be connected to the body. We were able to identify that the label emanated from a pair of Marks & Spencer's men's underwear, manufactured in 1999, and we were also able to identify that the textile emanated from a Pringle jumper that was manufactured between the years 2000 and 2004. It was green in colour, size extra large.
Detectives worked tirelessly to find the identity of the victim, but were still missing a vital piece of the jigsaw. They turned to a leading forensic artist.
North Wales Police contacted us because they wanted a facial depiction to be produced in the hope that would lead to identification. We look at the skull, and from the shape and size of the skull and the position of, and degree of the muscle attachments, we predict the shape of the muscles, and from the shape of the muscles we predict the shape of the face. We take measurements and assess the teeth to tell us about the lips. We look at the sides and base of the skull to tell us about the ears. We look at the orbits to tell us about the eyes. We can slowly build the skull into the facial appearance of the living individual. This face is quite a strong male face, quite deep-set eyes. Although the nose has been previously broken, looks quite straight. And because of the loss of a large number of teeth, he would have had quite sunken cheeks. The details that we're uncertain of are those things that we can't tell from looking at the bone, so skin colour exactly, eye colour, hair colour. He hasn't got an incredibly characteristic face. He hasn't got a massive nose or a cleft chin, but hopefully the overall appearance should spark something. If somebody knew him, they may be able to recognise something in there.
This is going to be really significant. There will be a loved one, friends, family that may recognise this person. Once we get to the name, we can work on why did this person become a victim, who would be responsible for that, and why would they want to have killed him.
Just a bit sad, you know, that he's been here for that long and people have been driving past probably daily and not realise he was here.
It's not easy. I'm reminded about it every day, really. I think about it pretty much every day, that someone's lost their life up here and that no one found him. It had to be us that found him.
It is an intriguing case. We're going to discuss how you can help in just a moment. But first, I went to look round the crime scene itself, just across the reservoir from here, on the Denbigh Moors, with Detective Superintendent Iestyn Davis. Iestyn, they were camping just up there.
They were indeed about 100 yards just up this track from here, Jeremy.
And the rally was about 300 yards that way?
As the crow flies, about 300 yards that way, yes.
And these 2 brothers come into the forest here looking for firewood.
They enter this part of the forest, and one of the brothers came to this location to collect some wood. And it was at this very point that the skull was found, covered in moss and undergrowth. Clearly been here for some time.
Right, so the skull was here, and you found other remains.
We did indeed. We conducted an examination that took about 2 to 3 weeks, and we recovered from this location more or less the full skeleton remains of a male. We've cut away a lot of the trees, so it was quite dense and quite a challenging examination.
But you found it?
We did.
Well, Iestyn is with me now live, and it's just remarkable that you've managed to actually rebuild a face from the bones.
Yes, Jeremy, this is really significant for our investigation. We've managed to get full facial reconstruction of the man. We've got 3 images today, the first of which is the man how he would have looked in his 50s. We've got further 2 images of how the man would look like in his 60s and 70s, because at this moment in time I can't be certain of the age.
Well, it's extraordinary to see those on the screen there. And this area is very remote. We've been here all day today. How do you think the victim came to be here, and crucially when?
Jeremy, I think he was killed elsewhere. This is a deposition site. We know that that area of forest was planted in 1985, and it's our belief that that body would have been deposited at that location sometime between 1995 and 2005. That's based on the tree growth and also the decomposition of the body.
And you actually have a full DNA profile of the victim?
Yes, significant for ourselves. We've got a full DNA profile. Unfortunately, it doesn't match anyone on the national database. However, I would ask for anyone who think they may recognise this person to contact us and give us the name so we can progress the investigation.
Because the key thing is first you identify him and then you identify the person who killed him.
Indeed, that's going to be really important for us. And I'll also ask for people from the medical profession to get in touch with us. We've discussed the spinal damage to the body and also the previous fractures. And there might be someone from the dental profession who might recognise their own work here. Ultimately, this is someone's loved one. I need to find out who this person is so that my investigation can progress.
Thank you, Iestyn, very much indeed. Let's just take one more look at the image if we can. If you've got any idea who this might be, please call us now on 08 085 600 600. Calls are free from landlines and mobile phones, and the numbers will be on screen throughout the programme. Tina.
Time now for our CCTV roundup, and we've got some particularly brazen lawbreakers tonight, so keep your eyes peeled. A man in a hat and glasses enters a newly refurbished hotel in Watford. He bypasses reception and heads straight for the rooms. It seems like he can't find the right level. He starts on the 3rd floor and goes down to 2nd. What's he up to? The man creeps down the corridor. Maybe he's found what he's been searching for. If you look closely, you can see he's holding a bottle. But it's not water in there. He starts a fire outside one of the rooms. He runs away, but his sense of direction fails him again, and he ends up in the basement. When all the guests head for the exits, lo and behold, he's finally found his way out, but this time without his hat and glasses. This could have been really serious, but thankfully no one was hurt. Take a good look at him again. Someone must know who he is. A man is walking with a 15-year-old boy. The man started following him on Eastbury Road, Watford. As they approach Bushey train station, the man asks if the boy will engage in oral sex. When the boy declines, the man tries to keep their interaction light-hearted by offering his hand for a high five. As the boy obliges, the man touches him inappropriately. The man leaves the station, looking back in the direction of the boy. Do you recognise him? Look closely at this one. It happens rather quickly. A man is walking home when he's accosted by a man with a black handgun. According to police, the victim is forced down an alleyway and made to hand over his rucksack and a case containing musical equipment. Take a look again. Police believe this is the same man seen 15 minutes earlier refuelling an R-plate black Honda CR-V. Police also believe it's the same vehicle that drove past during the robbery. If you've seen the car or the guy with the gun, get in touch. Take a look at these 2 men in this pub footage from Sherborne, Dorset. They approach a member of staff in the garden and start to ask about bed and breakfast. Whilst one acts as a decoy, the other one heads inside and starts searching the staff-only areas of the premises. He has a look around the bar, but someone disturbs him, so he hides around the corner. When the coast is clear, he tries again. He goes behind the bar and attempts to open a safe. And this isn't the first time that the pair have tried to burgle a boozer. Here you can see them earlier that day in a Warminster watering hole. They managed to break in during the early hours of the morning and steal from the till. Then, just over an hour after that, they are at it again at a pub in Stowford while customers are eating breakfast. One of them sneaks into the office and uses a tool to nab a safe. They have taken thousands of pounds that don't belong to them. We need your help to call time on these two. Call or text if you can name anyone we've just shown. Text will be charged at your standard message rate. And remember, you can follow all of the developments during the programme on our live updates webpage.
The small rural hamlet of Basingstoke in Aberdeenshire is another very quiet part of the UK. It is where 67-year-old Brian McCandy called home and where his life was brutally ended 6 months ago. Tonight, his brother Bill asks why anyone would want to harm someone who lived such a seemingly simple life. This is Basingstoke, on the outskirts of Rothy-Norman, 30 minutes drive from Aberdeen. For 65 years, it had been Brian McCandy's home. He lived there almost all his life. But his semi-detached house is now a crime scene. No longer a home, but the site of a murder investigation.
And we came to live in Basingstoke there about 1951. And he'd lived there ever since. We all left home and Brian was left. He stayed with his mother since the early 60s.
After his mother passed away, Brian ran a small business from his garage. He was always on hand to fix cars or do odd jobs for people.
His life was cars, just fix cars. People come from as far away as Aberdeen, from Peterhead, because word of mouth, we said that guy does a good job. And he was always busy.
On Friday the 11th of March, Brian left home to go to Turriff, a town 10 miles away. These are the last known CCTV images of Brian capturing him in the town's Bank of Scotland branch that morning. Detectives made it home around 1 p.m. The next day, Saturday the 12th of March, some friends visited his home. When they couldn't get an answer, they called the police. They forced entry and found Brian's body inside. He had been murdered, likely attacked with a heavy weapon.
We just can't put our finger on the reason for it happening. There seemed to be no apparent reason. Well, it's not easy to move on. Sometime in the day you always think about what happened.
Brian's murder shocked the entire community. They cannot understand why such a quiet and unassuming man was killed. Detectives believe the answers lie locally. Over the last 6 months, they've appealed extensively for information, stopping hundreds of cars outside his home.
Is there somebody going to come forward? We might get a bit of information or sometime, hopefully. Somebody somewhere knows what happened. If we're going to keep a secret now, it's either come forward and tell the police, or you've got to keep that secret forever.
I'm joined now by DCI Ian Smith from Police Scotland, who's leading the investigation. Brian lived a really quiet life, so who would have wanted to hurt him?
Well, Brian lived almost all his life in an area called Basingstoke in rural Aberdeenshire. Now, I think we can see in the map that his address was directly adjacent to the B9001, and that was between the village of Rothinorman and the town of Turriff. We haven't established a motive for Brian's death, and that's why we need to speak to anybody that was maybe an acquaintance, a customer, a neighbour or a friend. We need them to come forward.
And there are two people in particular you'd like to trace?
That's right. We know that Brian was visited on the afternoon of Friday the 11th of March by two men. One was described as being aged between 40 and 50 years of age, quite a heavy-set build. The second male was 20 to 30 years of age, slight build with blue collar-length hair. Now, we know they were in possession of a maroon or burgundy estate car which was parked in Brian's driveway. These individuals haven't been identified as yet. They could be key witnesses, and we'd urge them to come forward.
And any information about the weapon that they might have used?
Well, we know that Brian was probably murdered with a heavy weapon. Now, we've not recovered that weapon as yet. We know the weapon will be bloodstained. We know the attacker's clothing would be bloodstained. And we've carried out a fairly extensive forensic examination of Brian's address and obtained forensic results, and that process is ongoing.
Now, we saw some CCTV. We can put it back up here, but you're hoping there might be some more?
That's right. As you can see, we have some CCTV we recovered from the bank that Brian visited on the morning of Friday the 11th of March, but we're urging people that may live in the local area that have their own CCTV. In addition, if you've driven the road, the B9001, past Brian's address, again, come forward if you've got some camera footage, that might be dash cam footage. In addition, again, we're appealing for anybody to come forward that has information about Brian's murder. Help us solve his murder.
Thank you very much indeed, Ian. So please do call now if you can shed any light on what happened to Brian. The number again for you, 08 085 600 600. Also, you may want to know that Crime Stoppers is offering a reward of up to £10,000 in connection with this case. And they're on 0800 555 111. Tina.
Now, it's the time of year when parents nervously pack off their sons and daughters to university for the first time. For most undergraduates, these first terms are an exciting way to start their adult lives. But as Freshers Week begins for many, we look at the disturbing prevalence of sexual assaults on students and ask for your help to solve a particularly horrendous attack on a fresher. Manchester University is Britain's biggest campus. This month, 8,000 new students are arriving, and like many others all over the country, it will be their first time away from home. It's a time to enjoy themselves and make new friends, but for some, newfound independence in an unfamiliar city makes them potentially vulnerable. Something Tahir Nazir, the so-called university prowler, took advantage of when he travelled to towns across the UK last year, targeting student accommodation. South Wales police became involved after reports he'd broken into a student's house and climbed into one of the beds.
A few weeks after the offence in Cardiff, he'd committed an offence up in Manchester. We then looked at the CCTV footage and we could see that he was actually entering into the premises and he was literally just trying doors and I would just say, trying his luck and going into the rooms purely looking for girls. I genuinely believe that Mr. Nazir was predatory in his behaviour, knowing that there would be far more students around, unfamiliar with their surroundings.
Tahir Nazir was eventually caught after sneaking into student accommodation in Manchester, and in May this year he was found guilty of trespass with intent to commit a sexual offence, a sexual assault and attempted rape, and was sentenced to a minimum of 12 years. While this was a very unusual case, sexual assault is higher among female students when compared with other women. In Manchester alone, 109 sexual offences against students were recorded last year, something the University Students' Union are desperate to change.
Hi, I'm Jenny. I'm the Women's Officer here at the Students' Union.
They identified key areas of the city where they felt most vulnerable.
We asked students to sort of actually physically pin on a map the areas of Manchester that they felt most at risk. In terms of street harassment and being approached, this is definitely an area that concerns students.
It's quite scary to think that even though there are so many students living here, it's really not that safe to be coming home alone at night. We wouldn't want to scare people into thinking they can't go anywhere in Manchester, but at the same time, I think it's really important that people know areas which are known to be unsafe or quite daunting or poorly lit or quiet at night.
To fight back, they organised a march to take a stand against street violence, sexual harassment and rape.
When we did our Reclaim the City, what we did was we brought the gazebo, we brought the lights, we really filled it with noise and music, and we made this space safe again.
The police are also keen to play their part in keeping students, both men and women, safe.
We're out tonight to offer support, guidance. It makes the students feel confident that we're here to help if they need that help. It's also a large deterrent for anybody that's out there that's wanting to commit crime tonight. I think when they come into Manchester, because it's such a big city, it's getting the bearings, knowing the route from club to pub, also their route home. Very important.
Hi guys, all right.
All we'd ask them to do is plan the night, have a great time, but plan where they're going at the end of the night, stay in the groups. If they feel vulnerable or they feel as if they're being followed or they're at risk, there's plenty of points, stores, offices that are around that they can go into.
But for one student, this wasn't enough, even though she shared a licensed taxi home with a friend. We've changed the identity of her and her mother to protect them.
I didn't want her going away, but I was really proud of her. And then she got the results that she needed and she couldn't wait to get out. It was like she had the world at her feet.
Amy had just started university in Liverpool and was enjoying her Freshers' Week. On the 28th of September last year, she left a bar with a friend and jumped in a taxi with a man they didn't know. After her friend was dropped off, she was left alone in the car with the man.
This person was touching my leg and stuff, and I was sort of shying him off, moving off to the side, and this person was trying to kiss me, and I was like, no.
Amy left the taxi, but as you can see from this CCTV, the man stayed with her before finally pulling her into an alleyway, and then he raped her.
I just sort of remember when it was happening, he's like grabbing my mouth and telling me to be quiet and holding me down. It's kind of like when you get to the point when you give up trying to fight because you know there's no point. It's going to happen anyway.
She phoned me, and as soon as I answered, I knew before she even spoke, I knew it was the worst thing you could think of had happened. You never want any parent to get a call like that, never, from your own child. She flagged a taxi down and I said, "Give the taxi man your phone." And I explained to him, "Look, she's just been raped. Can you please just get her to the hospital?"
For him to think that he could get away with it, I don't know. I just think there needs to be some kind of justice.
I just want all girls and boys out there doing Freshers' Week and having fun just to be careful. You don't know who's going to be climbing into that taxi. Just be aware and never think it won't happen to you, because that's what we thought, and it can.
Well, you can find out more about the case of the student raped on the Wirral by going to our website. By the way, the man in the taxi has not been identified yet, so please take a look online and see if you can help. There's also an interview with Survivors Manchester, which is a male rape charity, as well as details of other organisations which offer support and advice. Also, it's worth knowing that victims of any crime can speak to victim support on 0808 16 89 111. Right, still to come tonight, a mother's appeal for help after she found her teenage son dying on her doorstep.
I opened the door and I saw him lying down, a pool of blood. And all he can say to me, "Mommy, I can't breathe."
But we've got wanted faces first, starting with this man, Alfie Gibbs. Detectives want to question him in connection to a fight between two groups of men outside a nightclub in which two people were stabbed, resulting in serious injuries. Gibbs is 20 and has friends and family in South London and the West Midlands. He has a London accent. This is 66-year-old Komar Udin. He was arrested by detectives in Leicestershire investigating the rape of a teenage girl. He was released on police bail but has failed to return for further questioning. Udin works as a faith healer and a spiritual advisor. He speaks little English and sometimes wears glasses. He has links to Leicester, Mansfield and London. Face number 3 is this man, Corey James Baptiste. He was due to appear in court charged with a number of sex offences against teenage children but didn't turn up. Baptiste is 24 and has links to Wickford and Purfleet in Essex, but it's believed he may now be in Europe. He could also be working as a teacher. Finally, for now, this is Lee Avery, although he also calls himself Ricky Adams. He was jailed for 5 years for robbery and assault and released early on licence, but he's failed to stick to the conditions of his release and is now wanted back in prison. Avery is 24 and has links to London, in particular Islington, and also to Essex. He has a number of scars on his face. If you know where any of tonight's other faces might be, please do get in touch using the numbers on screen. We will go through the rest of the lineup a little bit later.
Now, you may remember our investigation last week into the rise in knife crime. Well, sadly, we now need your help to solve yet another teen stabbing. 19-year-old Andrew Oteng Owusu, who was a full-time carer for his mother, was stabbed just a stone's throw away from his front door in East London last month. He died the following day. Joining me now is Detective Inspector Tom Dowry, who's leading the investigation. And tell us what we know, Tom, about the night Andrew died.
Thank you, Jeremy. It was late in the evening of Wednesday, the 3rd of August, when Andrew left his flat, the flat he shares with his mother in Sharratt Street, New Cross, South East London. We believe that Andrew was attacked about 11:35 in the evening and he received 2 stab wounds. He's managed to stagger through Lovelinch Close, down this street here, where there's a playground, to the bottom of the screen. The attack site is around where that white van is, and he's managed to get back to this communal door, which is his block of flats at Upnall House. Climbed 4 flights of stairs to where his flat is, and along the corridor, or the landing, to where he's banged on the front door and collapsed outside where his mother's found him.
Now, as we've said, Andrew was a full-time carer to his mum, Tina, who suffered from diabetes, and she's obviously devastated by his death.
Andrew was he was a very nice young man, humble, polite. He's very helpful, not just to me, but to the community. He's everything to me, because we've been together since he was born. So, I don't know what to say. I don't know. If they catch them, it will not bring Andrew back. But I want them to get caught, because they won't go out and do it to somebody else.
Well, that was Tina, Andrew's mum. What can people do to help you catch his killer or killers?
Well, we know Andrew was attacked in Lovelinch Close at a junction with Hornshay Street, which we can see on this map here, which is only a stone's throw away from his actual house, Upnall House, where the flat is located. When Andrew staggered into Lovelinch Close, there was a playground on the right-hand side, which had 5 witnesses. What we do know is that the witnesses have shouted across to Andrew to see if he was okay, but he shouted back, "No, I'm bleeding." But we also believe that Andrew was in company with a black male who appeared to be either herding or guiding him back to the flat. But unfortunately, this male has then peeled off to the left-hand side and through a gate into Hornshay Street. We would like to try and trace this black male, who maybe hold vital information for us.
You've got some CCTV, haven't you?
Yeah. We have very, very limited CCTV. However, we've got some pieces of witnesses we'd like to speak to, and which we have pulled together in this slide here.
So take us, show us what you've got.
What we have is a black male with a beard in a grey tracksuit who who appears in a street near to the actual murder scene twice within a short time frame of leading up to the actual murder. And we'd like to speak to this man. In the next shot, we have a cyclist who comes out to that junction at the top of the screen, looks over their shoulder as though they've been distracted by something. What did they see? What did they hear? We'd like to speak to that person as well. And this man here in the stripy top, we would like to try and trace him as well. He may hold vital information as he was in that area at the time of the murder.
Well, it's a tragic case, and Andrew was just murdered at just 19 years of age. Thank you very much, Tom. Please do get in touch using the numbers on the screen if you can help at all. Tina.
Well, let's just catch up now on new developments since we've been on air. Yeston is investigating the body found in the woods just over the water from here. It's been busy on the phones. What's the latest?
It has been very busy and really encouraged by the calls we've had in today. A number of names have been put forward in this case. I'd just like to remind viewers of the facial reconstruction that we have in this case. There's the image. That's the person aged in his 50s, but we've got the other images.
He could also be in his 60s or 70s.
He could be in the 60s or 70s. I'd like to remind viewers as well, we have a full DNA profile.
So you can rule people out. Thank you very much indeed. Keep the calls coming.
Thanks, Tina. So still to come tonight, the Colchester dog walker whose instincts may well have saved her life.
He was standing in the middle of the footbridge. He's turned around and looked at me, and I've obviously panicked because he didn't look quite right. So I've just turned straight back out, more into the open, and that's when we called the police.
More wanted faces first, starting with Michael Heron. Although he also uses the name Mac or Mick. He was jailed for violent disorder and released early from prison on licence, but he's failed to stick to the conditions of his release and is now wanted back in prison. Heron is 27 and has links to the Anfield, Bootle and Norris Green areas of Liverpool. He is described as violent, so just dial 999 if you know where he is. Face number 6 is this man, Tyrone Scaife, although you may know him as Tyrone McEwen. Detectives want to question him about an attack in South London in which a man suffered a broken jaw and cheekbones. Scaife is 28 and has a 2-inch scar on the little finger of his right hand. This is David Wrublewski, who also uses the first names Marco or Marik. Detectives want to question him in connection to numerous offences of pickpocketing on buses across London and also an incident in which a woman was pushed off a bus. Wrublewski is 33 and originally from Poland. He has a scar on his left cheek. And finally tonight, this is Uziz Foussassi, although he may be using a different name. He was questioned in connection with 2 counts of fraud and perverting the course of justice and released on police bail. But he's failed to return and is now wanted. Originally from Nigeria, 40-year-old Foussassi now has friends and family in Leicester, Coventry and Birmingham. He has a number of scars on his face. If you know where any of the faces are, then please do get in touch using the numbers on screen. You can find all the details on our website, alongside more people the police need your help to locate.
Updates now, and detectives leading the hunt for the male who sexually assaulted 2 young girls at Legoland in Windsor say they have received more than 200 calls as a result of last week's Crimewatch appeal. The 2 6-year-olds were on a day out with their families last month when they were assaulted in the Castaway Camp area of the resort. Officers say viewers have also sent in videos and photos taken on the day, which could help the investigation. They're also following up 8 new leads of particular interest.
In March last year, we featured the horrific attack on Darren Pigeon in Essex. He was scarred for life after being sprayed with acid through his open car window. Well, earlier this year, Ashley Russell was handed an extended sentence of 17 years for the attack. And this woman, Christina Story, received 8 years. The detective on the case said the Crimewatch appeal was a significant factor in bringing the 2 offenders to justice. Great work.
And you may remember we featured the shocking sexual assault on a 19-year-old woman in Cardiff. She was attacked in October 2013 as she made her way home from a Halloween party in the city. Well, this man, Stanislav Demator, pleaded guilty in July this year to attempted rape and sexual assault and has been jailed for 10 years.
Your calls have also helped detectives solve part of a murder mystery that we featured in December last year. We asked for your help after human remains were discovered by workmen digging a ditch in Bracknell. Police knew the man had been murdered but couldn't identify him. Someone watching the programme recognised the facial reconstruction we showed as Ivaris Danilovic, and his family was traced back to Lithuania. Detectives still need your help, though, in piecing together who killed him and why. Please call if you knew Danilovic or have any information about his last movements.
And you may remember some of these wanted faces who are now behind bars thanks to you. Alan Smith, featured in April last year, wanted for conning vulnerable victims out of hundreds of thousands of pounds. Well, your calls led detectives directly to him, and earlier this year he was jailed for 4 years and 4 months.
This man, Paul Price, was wanted after £20,000 worth of biscuits were stolen from a factory in South Wales. In April, he was jailed for 3 years and 4 months for his part in the theft.
And finally, this man, Daniel Rutter, is safely back behind bars. He appeared as a wanted face on our March programme after escaping from prison, where he was serving a life sentence for wounding with intent. He handed himself in after the programme and will now serve the rest of his sentence. Great work. Thank you so much for all your crucial calls. On last week's programme, we told you about Essex Police's major investigation into 2 seemingly random murders within the space of 3 months in Colchester. With little CCTV and no witnesses, the investigation team had their work cut out to ensure they caught the killer before he struck again.
I took a phone call at home from the senior investigating officer asking me to go straight to Colchester because somebody had been killed.
There was a knock at the door and it was 2 police officers, and they came in and asked me to sit down. All I can remember is basically scream and didn't realise it was actually me.
On the 29th of March 2014, Jim Atfield was found with more than 100 knife wounds in a park in Colchester, Essex. Detectives began a tireless hunt for his killer.
There was no clear motive. There wasn't that single piece of evidence, and there were no immediate witnesses who came forward.
But 3 months into the investigation came more shocking news.
The SIO said, "There's been another murder in Colchester." It was a moment of, have we got somebody here who's going out killing people?
We've had 2 knife murders in Colchester in less than 3 months. It's important that people don't go out alone in isolated places.
On the 17th of June, student Nahid Al-Manir was found stabbed to death on a public path. The 31-year-old from Saudi Arabia was studying at the University of Essex. She was on her way to the nearby campus when she was attacked.
It was clear that she'd been the victim of a vicious assault.
2 young people had been brutally murdered within the same town. The first murder of Jim was incredibly unusual for Colchester. To have a second murder in less than 3 months was extraordinary. You could feel the sense of fear within the local community.
People were saying, we're not going to go out. We're not going to go out on our own. We're not going to go out at night, especially the elderly. Very, very, very worried. It was terrifying.
Detectives immediately launched a second murder inquiry.
There was speculation around whether or not her being dressed in traditional Muslim wear could be a factor. There was never any evidence that that was the case. Again, this appeared to be a random attack.
They began an extensive search of the area.
We recovered literally hundreds and hundreds of items. In total, over 14,000 items were submitted for forensic examination.
But again, no murder weapon was found, and detectives had very little to go on.
There were no eyewitnesses that had come forward. There was no CCTV that covered the area. There was some CCTV imagery of her passing a parade of shops. That image certainly didn't appear to show anybody following her. It was clearly going to be one of the most demanding times for our investigative teams in the north of Essex that we'd ever faced.
They found just one trace of the killer.
There was a very small amount of DNA that was recovered from Naheed's body, and that was preserved so that that could be subject to examination in the future.
2 brutal knife attacks within 3 months. But were the deaths of Jim and Naheed actually connected?
It was clear, whilst there were some similarities, there was no clear evidence that linked those 2 murders together. And it was on that basis that we deemed that the investigations would be separate but parallel.
They began to bring people in for questioning.
We looked at 69 people who had been identified as they'd either committed knife crime in the area or violent offences or were suffering from significant mental health conditions that warranted us speaking to them. One of those people was a 15-year-old boy. He had one previous offence for a knife point robbery at a local newsagent's. He said that he was at home on his own and he hadn't gone out that morning.
I was in all morning on my own.
We were never able to eliminate him, but in comparison to some of the other people that we looked at, his offending history combined with his age didn't flag any particular concerns.
As the investigation progressed, officers made nationwide appeals for help.
We were making significant public appeals. One in particular was regarding a dark tan jacket that was described as possibly Italian designer in style. A number of witnesses described seeing somebody leaving the area wearing a jacket of that type in the minutes that followed Naheed's murder. That became a key focus for us.
As they had done with Jim's case, they turned to Crimewatch.
We're particularly keen to trace a male seen wearing a distinctive beige jacket.
Despite those repeated appeals, nobody came forward and described who may have been wearing that jacket.
Whilst a number of arrests were made, a year passed and detectives were no closer to catching the killer or killers.
It was horrible, day to day, a waiting game. And every time the phone rang and it was my liaison officer, it was a question, oh, have they found somebody?
We knew that we were building a picture, but we didn't have that vital piece of evidence, even after many months of tireless work.
You sometimes think, I don't know where the answer's going to come from. You know, I always thought that we would find out who did this. No stone had been left unturned.
Then, on the 26th of May 2015, a dog walker made a call which may well have saved her life.
On this particular day, I'd literally got to about here and I could see the picture of the back of a man's head. He was standing in the middle of the footbridge. He's turned around and looked at me, and I've obviously panicked because he didn't look quite right. So I've just turned straight back out and walked the same way I came in. There was another lady down there, and we came back in together. He was crouching down in a corner down there and just staring at us. And I recognised the jacket. And we literally just got straight out of here, more into the open, and that's when we called the police.
When PC Loomis arrived on the Surrey Brook Trail, he found a young man who was hiding in a bush.
Show me your hands. Open your hand. Drop the knife. Drop the knife. Drop the knife.
In his pocket, he had a small folding knife, and he was also wearing gloves. We were in May, it was warm, that was unusual. And clearly, PC Loomis knew that Naheed had been murdered close to that location less than 12 months previously. And he made absolutely the right decision and arrested that young man for possessing an offensive weapon in a public place. That young man was taken to custody. Very early on, he was making comments claiming that he was responsible for the murder of Jim Atfield and Naheed Al-Manir.
I just thought, is this really it? Is this what we've been waiting for? Is this how this is going to end?
The teenager in custody was 16-year-old James Fairweather.
Suddenly, here's a young person in custody claiming to be responsible. That meant that he would have been 15 at the time. The first reaction of many was that of disbelief. How can somebody so young be responsible for 2 brutal attacks.
But their work was far from over.
I knew at that point that his admission alone would never be enough. We conducted a number of searches at his home address. We did recover a number of items relating to what appeared to be a fascination in serial killers.
Detectives also spent many hours interviewing the teenager.
Sitting in an interview room across the way from someone who's polite, but describing such ferocious attacks was just quite a surreal feeling.
He said voices in his head made him carry out the killings.
Some voices were talking to me. You need to make a sacrifice or we're going to come and get you. You need to do it. Went up to them. Stood over like that. Not helping that. I stabbed him first there. I'd done it a few times. While I was doing that, my voices were laughing and laughing and laughing louder and louder.
It was quite chilling to watch because he's a young man, a child, effectively.
You had a boy basically telling you these things that he'd done. He knew details that we hadn't released to anybody. It was very clear to me very early on that this was the right person.
It was decided there was enough evidence to charge.
The phone call came in and they said that they'd obviously charged him and that they needed to thank me because if it wasn't for me, they would have definitely been looking for another body and it may well have been my body.
We didn't think that somebody from our community was capable of carrying out such vicious and violent assaults. We certainly didn't think it'd be a local teenager.
But what had really driven this young man to commit such brutal murders?
He was using the voices as a way of avoiding responsibility for what he'd done. What was going on in his mind were the thoughts and intense interest in serial killers, killing, and deviant sexual interest. He had the immaturity of youth and lack of responsibility, which coupled with his callous unconcern and lack of empathy, were a potent mix which allowed him to go over from the fantasy into actually starting to carry out his desire to kill people.
Whilst awaiting trial, Fairweather changed his account and denied any involvement in the murders. But by that time, officers had made a significant forensic breakthrough.
The small DNA sample that we've been able to recover from Naheed's body, forensic techniques had now developed to complete a comparison around the DNA sample taken from Fairweather, and that indicated a strong likelihood that the DNA recovered from Naheed's body was a match.
In January, 17-year-old James Fairweather appeared at the Old Bailey. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility, blaming the voices in his head.
The prosecution were given a short period of time to go away and consider whether or not they wanted to accept that plea. Our expert formed a very clear view, though. He wasn't driven by voices in his head. It was right and proper that we ask a jury to decide whether or not James Fairweather was sufficiently in control of his actions to be guilty of murder.
They believed he was in control of his actions when he murdered Jim and Naheed. And in April, James Fairweather was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to serve a minimum of 27 years.
There was no emotion either when the jury returned their verdicts or when he was sentenced. And that's quite a sad tale, really.
Until you hear that word, until you actually hear them say guilty, you're just sort of almost holding your breath. The work that everybody put into this had all paid off and we were able to give the answers to the families.
It was like a big weight had been lifted. It was, yes, justice is done. It does allow us to a certain degree, put it behind us and move forward. It means that Jim can rest in peace at last.
We took in excess of 3,300 statements. Over 1,800 officers and staff worked across those two investigations. It was on a scale that was out of the ordinary. The local community know, as Naheed's family do, and Jim's family, that Fairweather will spend a significant proportion of his life behind bars.
unbelievable case, but justice at least for Jim and Nahid's families. Though the killer, James Fairweather, is in fact appealing against his sentence, which is that he must serve at least 27 years. We'll find out on Wednesday whether he's successful. Right, just time before we go to check in with Tina, who has the latest on what has come in on the phones.
Yes, it's very busy in here tonight. We've had potential leads and also some names for the body that was found just over the water from where we are now. What can you tell us?
We've had lots of calls, lots of suggested names for the identity of this man, really encouraging. So I'd ask for those calls to continue.
Let's take another look at the facial reconstruction.
Yeah, the facial reconstruction is really key here. We've got 3 images there of the person in the 50s, 60s and 70s. So
Okay.
I'd like the calls to come in.
All right, thank you very much. Ian, how's tonight been for you? A pensioner beaten to death in his own home. Has any useful information come in?
Yes, we had a really encouraging response this evening, particularly in relation to the maroon estate car that we appealed for and the 2 men that accompanied that car.
And Tom, you haven't had the crucial call that you need, but you are announcing for the first time a reward.
Yeah, we're offering a reward of £20,000 leading to the arrest and prosecution of anyone held responsible for the murder of Andrew.
OK, now this was a mother who found her son dying on her doorstep. If you know anything that could help, please do pick up the phone, get in touch.
Well, that is everything for now on BBC One and indeed for this series. But you can still follow all of the developments on our live updates webpage. Head there for the latest from the detectives as they chase up all of your calls. Also, do please take another look at the reconstructions, wanted faces and CCTV, which all stay online after the programme is taken off iPlayer. The phone lines stay open until midnight tomorrow, so keep dialing if you can help. We will be back in the spring, but for now, thank you so much for all of your calls. They really do make a difference. From everyone here in North Wales, goodbye.